I'm Emily Lancaster, 35 years old, and I just got betrayed in the boardroom of my own family's company. My father handed over the reins of the jam business I built from scratch to my baby sister, who can barely send an email, let alone run production. I gave everything for this company, and now I'm about to take it all back. Before we dive into this story of loyalty, sabotage, and sweet revenge, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I love knowing where my listeners are tuning in from. The Jam conference room always smelled faintly of strawberries, sweet, nostalgic. But that morning, it reeked of betrayal. "Are you kidding me?" I snapped, standing so fast my chair nearly toppled backward. "She doesn't even know how to log into the inventory system." My voice echoed against the glass walls, but I didn't care. Everyone was there. The department heads, the interns, even Clara from accounting, who usually avoided meetings like the plague. My father, Harold Lancaster, sat at the head of the table, calm as a Sunday morning preacher, while my sister Vanessa leaned back in her chair with that infuriating smirk. Vanessa, 25, fresh from a 6-month sabbatical in Costa Rica, where she'd posted more bikini pics than most influencers. And now, according to Dad, she was going to lead product development. "I think it's time for some fresh blood, Emily," Dad said, steepling his fingers like a seasoned CEO, which he technically was, even if half the decisions he made lately came from golf buddies and bad gut instincts. I blinked at him, hoping absurdly that he was joking. "Fresh blood," I repeated, my mouth dry. "I've developed every product we've sold in the last 6 years. I revived this brand. I got our jam into Kroger. Do you even remember the Kroger deal, Dad?" "Of course I do," he said evenly, not looking me in the eye. "And yet you're handing the wheel to someone who thought SKU was a skincare brand last week." Vanessa leaned forward now, twisting her gold bracelet around her wrist. "Maybe it's time you take a break, Emily. You've been intense lately." There was a hush in the room. She said intense, the way people say unhinged when they're trying to sound polite. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I glanced at the faces around the table. Not one of them met my eyes, not even Marcus, my assistant, who I knew had pulled 3 all-nighters with me prepping for our last product launch. My father cleared his throat. "Let's not make this personal. You've carried a lot on your shoulders, sweetheart, but Vanessa brings a different kind of vision. A vision that involves color-coding her lip glosses," I muttered under my breath. "Enough," Dad said, and his tone was final. I looked at him, really looked at him. The silver hair, the worn hands, the man who once told me I was the smartest person he knew. The man who let me skip prom to tour food science labs across the state because he believed I'd build something incredible. And now, he was handing my life's work over to my sister, whose biggest business win was an Etsy shop she forgot to ship orders from. It wasn't just disappointment flooding me. It was humiliation. I felt it burning in my chest, crawling up my neck, tightening my throat. "I see," I said finally, voice low. "Then I guess we're done here." I turned and walked out. My heels clicked against the tile, each step louder than the last until I reached the glass door. I paused, glanced back once at the stunned, silent room, and then slammed the door behind me so hard the jam posters on the wall rattled. I didn't cry. Not yet. But in the silence of my car, parked outside the factory where I'd spent the last decade of my life building something real, I stared at the steering wheel and thought, if they think I'll go quietly, they don't know me at all. The hum of the conveyor belt was the only sound that greeted me the next morning. I stood in the center of the jam production facility, surrounded by the soft clinks of glass jars and the occasional hiss of the labeling machine. The place smelled like home, warm sugar and fruit simmering in giant kettles. But today it felt different. The walls felt thinner, the air heavier. "Emily," Marcus whispered, falling into step beside me. He handed me a clipboard without a word. The tension in his face told me everything. I scanned the page. My stomach dropped. "Vanessa sent this to Kroger's distribution center," I asked, barely keeping my voice down. "She signed off on it last night before leaving." The entire back half of the shipment had the wrong batch numbers printed on the labels. I flipped through the rest of the documentation, each sheet confirming a mistake that could cost us tens of thousands if Kroger rejected the delivery. I let out a breath through my nose. If we don't reprint every label and reseal every box, that entire order's dead on arrival. I know, he said, grimacing. I already pulled the team from the orchard run to start restacking the pallets. I didn't ask why he didn't call Vanessa. We both knew the answer. Across the floor, the factory workers, some of whom had been with the company longer than I'd been alive, worked quietly. No one asked questions. No one made eye contact, but I could feel the unease simmering just under the surface. This wasn't their mess. It was mine to clean up. Again. I grabbed a pair of gloves and joined Clara at the sorting station. Pull any case with a red QC sticker. We'll start there. Clara nodded, her eyes scanning the labels with silent urgency. 20 minutes in, I was knee-deep in sticky cardboard and relabeling protocols when I heard the click of heels. Vanessa. She strolled in wearing a white silk blouse, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, holding a lavender oat milk latte like she was auditioning for a reality show. She stopped just short of the production line, looking around like she'd forgotten what this part of the building even did. "Hey!" she sang out. "Don't worry, I got this." She winked at no one in particular, then breezed past the chaos and disappeared into her office. I didn't look up. I couldn't afford the distraction. Marcus, standing beside me with a heat gun, muttered under his breath, "Got what exactly?" "She got a coffee," I said flatly, pulling another label. We worked in silence after that. No one said the obvious. She had no idea how close we were to losing one of our largest accounts. No one questioned why the production manager, me, was fixing a crisis caused by the woman now in charge of product development. Because questioning meant confrontation. And everyone had seen what happened in the boardroom yesterday. And yet I kept going, hands aching, sweat beading at my hairline, because I couldn't let her ruin everything I built. Not yet. At some point, I caught sight of Dad walking past the glass window above, his phone to his ear, not even glancing down. I wondered if he even knew the mess his fresh blood had made, or if he cared. By noon, we had reboxed half the shipment. I stood, stretching my back, when Clara finally broke the silence. "You shouldn't have to do this alone." I paused, unsure what to say. She looked me square in the eye. "We all know who should be running things, just so you know." My throat tightened. I gave a small nod, blinking fast. "Let's just save the shipment." But her words stuck with me for the rest of the day. They were a whisper of validation in a building that had gone cold overnight. By 3 p.m., Vanessa emerged from her office with a fresh lip gloss and a phone glued to her ear, laughing at something. She glanced down at us, noticed the relabeling efforts, and raised a brow. "Oh, shoot. Was that from the batch I submitted yesterday?" she asked, like she'd just remembered she'd left her hair straightener on at home. "Yes," I said, not even trying to sugarcoat the edge in my voice. Vanessa smiled like this was a charming oopsie. "Good thing you caught it then," she waved. "Thanks, sis." And with that, she left. I stood there, glue on my hands, heart like a fist in my chest, watching her walk out of the factory like she'd just saved the day. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt dangerous. Because deep down, I knew something she didn't. I wasn't just cleaning up her mess, I was taking notes. By Thursday, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd cleared the worst of it. We had salvaged the Kroger shipment, the team was running smoothly again, and I almost believed Vanessa might be easing up. Until I walked into the storage room and saw the rows of mislabeled jars. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is," I murmured, heart sinking as I picked up one of the mason jars. The label read Blackberry Lemon Thyme, our best-selling seasonal flavor, but inside was clearly plain strawberry. Not even the same color. I pulled another. Same mistake. Again. Again. A sick feeling bloomed in my stomach. These weren't just a few rogue jars. This was an entire batch, probably hundreds. I turned to Marcus, who had just walked in behind me. "Where did this batch go?" he blanched. "Those are part of the boutique order. Emily, they ship tomorrow." I swore under my breath and grabbed my phone. Vanessa had signed off on the label sheet yesterday. I double-checked the logs. Her initials were scrawled next to the barcode codes and SKU matches. This wasn't just a small oversight. This was gross negligence. I stormed through the hallway and down the breakroom corridor. The overhead lights flickered as if the building itself was trying to brace me for what was coming. I found her exactly where I expected, curled up on the breakroom couch, glass of red wine in one hand, phone in the other. Vanessa, I snapped, holding up a jar. Explain this. She barely looked up. What's the problem? I set the jar down on the table with a thud. That label says blackberry lemon thyme. It's strawberry jam. You labeled the entire boutique batch wrong. She blinked, her expression flat. Oh, I laughed bitterly. Vanessa, this order is for a client that featured us in their holiday campaign. They're expecting limited edition labels and you sent them the wrong product. I didn't send anything, she said with air quotes. I just reviewed the labels. You signed off on them. I was told to just approve the ones in green, she said, taking a sip of wine. Dad said not to overthink it, and honestly, these things all look the same after a while. I stared at her, stunned. Do you hear yourself? You're in charge of product development and you didn't even check what was inside the jars. She rolled her eyes. Dad said to let mistakes happen, it's how I'll learn. I stood there, blinking. It was like trying to argue with a throw pillow. I swear, I said under my breath, you could burn the building down and he'd hand you a matchbook and call it a growth opportunity. Vanessa finally set her wine down and crossed her arms. You need to relax. It's not like we can't just switch the labels. You've done it before. And I will again, I muttered, grabbing the jar. Because apparently that's all I'm good for around here, cleaning up your messes. Oh, come on, she said lightly. You act like the company will fall apart without you. I turned, pausing at the door. For a second, I almost said something cutting, something final, but I just walked out, because I knew it wouldn't matter. No amount of logic or facts would ever penetrate the bubble Vanessa lived in. Not when my father kept reinforcing it with his blind faith and second chances. And yet, as I returned to the production floor to coordinate yet another emergency fix, something inside me shifted. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. A pattern no one seemed interested in stopping. So maybe it was time I stopped it myself. Not with another late night, not with another frantic fix, but with something that couldn't be undone. The email hit my inbox at 8:43 a.m. Subject line, client database error, urgent. I stared at it, heart already tightening. Seconds later, a second message popped up. Then a third. By the time I clicked open the first one, I already knew it was bad. But even I wasn't prepared for what I saw. All client records missing. No access to CRM. No backups located on the shared drive. I bolted out of my chair and sprinted to the IT room. The walls were cold and humming. I shoved the door open and nearly tripped over the discarded USB drives and half-unpacked cardboard boxes littering the floor. At the center of it all, Vanessa sat in front of the main terminal, tears threatening to fall, but her expression was oddly blank. What happened? I demanded, rushing to the terminal. I was just trying to clean it up, she said, voice thin. There were so many old files. Dad said it was time to streamline and the whole thing was slow, so I just... You deleted the client database, I said, slowly turning toward her. All of it. I didn't mean to. I thought I was just removing duplicates. I didn't wait for the rest. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I dropped to the console and opened the admin recovery panel. Please, let my backup still be here, I whispered, digging into the hidden backup logs I'd set up 6 months ago, because somewhere deep down I knew something like this would happen. The screen loaded with agonizing slowness. The backup directory blinked to life. I exhaled, then got to work restoring the last full version. It wasn't perfect. We'd lose a few days of records, but at least we wouldn't be operating blind. Behind me, Vanessa hovered uselessly, wringing her hands like she was at a school presentation. Can't you just call it? She asked softly. You're looking at it, I snapped. 30 minutes later, the system began repopulating. Slowly, client profiles reappeared, addresses, contacts, orders, loyalty accounts, like ghosts returning to their bodies. At noon, we all gathered in the main conference room for what was supposed to be a routine team sync. Dad stood at the head of the table, already irritated. Vanessa sat 2 seats to his right, eyes red but lips pressed tight. I stayed silent until the room quieted. Then I said clearly, Vanessa deleted our entire client base this morning. Gasps, real ones. Even Clara let out a sharp breath. I glanced around the table. Sales, marketing, distribution, all frozen. She was trying to clean it up, I added. Fortunately, I had a private backup system in place. I plugged in a flash drive, loaded the restored CRM interface onto the screen. Everything's been recovered, minus the last 4 days of data which I've assigned Marcus and myself to manually input by EOD. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus cleared his throat. Wait, you had your own backup system? I nodded. Since when? 6 months, I said, eyes still on my father. Harold Lancaster's jaw clenched. He looked down at the table, then at Vanessa, but she was already crumbling. I didn't know, she said quietly. No one taught me that system. You were in charge, I cut in. You wanted the title, the paycheck, the respect. That means responsibility, too. Clara murmured something under her breath. Others shifted in their chairs, glancing toward me, then back to Dad. The silence grew heavier. I thought for one breathless moment that he might say thank you. But he didn't. Instead, he rubbed his temples and said, "Let's move on." That was it, move on. I gathered my papers, slid them into a folder, and stood to leave. As I turned toward the door, I caught Marcus's eyes. He gave the smallest nod. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but they saw me. Finally, they saw me. And that was the most dangerous thing of all for them, because once you're seen, you can't be silenced. For the rest of the afternoon, the office hummed with an odd quiet. People spoke in low voices, like the walls themselves had witnessed too much. By 5, I had logged the last of the missing entries from the recovered client database. My fingers ached, but the job was done. We dodged a total catastrophe, and no one could deny it. When I shut down my computer, I caught my reflection in the darkened screen. I looked tired, but behind the exhaustion there was something sharper, something defiant. Maybe now Dad would finally see the truth. Maybe now he'd realize who really kept this company alive. At 6, Marcus poked his head into my office. "Harold wants you in the boardroom." I smiled faintly. "Let me guess, emergency post-mortem." He hesitated. That pause told me everything. "You'll see." When I stepped inside, the air was heavy again. My father stood by the window, hands behind his back, gazing out over the parking lot like a king surveying a battlefield. Vanessa sat at the conference table, her posture prim and uncharacteristically subdued. A performance, I could smell it. "Sit down," Dad said. I obeyed, smoothing the folder in front of me. "I've heard what happened this morning," he began. "Vanessa made a mistake, but your reaction, your handling of it, has created unnecessary tension in this office." I blinked. "Unnecessary tension." He turned, his voice calm, rehearsed. "You embarrassed your sister in front of the team." I let out a small, incredulous laugh. "She deleted our entire client database. And you could have addressed it privately," he countered. "Instead, you called her out in front of everyone." "I reported a data loss during an emergency meeting," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "That's not humiliation, that's accountability." Vanessa finally spoke, her voice trembling just enough to sound innocent. "Dad, it's fine. I can handle the criticism." It felt like she was trying to make an example out of me. "An example," I repeated. "You're the head of product development, Vanessa. If losing every client record isn't an example, what is?" "Enough," Dad snapped louder now. "I've made my decision. You'll apologize to your sister." The words hit me harder than I expected. I stared at him, waiting for some sign this was a twisted joke. But his expression didn't change. "Apologize," I repeated quietly. "For saving the company. For the way you did it," he corrected. "You made her look incompetent." I felt something in me break, quiet but absolute. It was like hearing a final verdict after years of appeal. "I didn't make her look incompetent," I said softly. "She did that herself." He took a step forward. "Emily," I shook my head. "No, you want me to apologize for being good at my job, for doing what you taught me to do." "That's enough," he said again, his voice tight now. "Either you apologize or you step away from the project." Behind him, Vanessa crossed her arms and leaned back, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. She was enjoying this, the spectacle of my undoing, the power her incompetence had bought her. I stood slowly, pushing my chair in with deliberate calm. "You really think I'll apologize for preventing a disaster?" I said. "For doing what no one else in this room could?" "Emily," he warned, "don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I'm not," I said, gathering my folder. "You already made it impossible." For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then I looked him square in the eye. "I won't apologize for saving the company." I turned and walked out. My vision blurred as I made it to the hallway. I didn't realize I was crying until I reached the elevator and saw my reflection in the mirrored doors, mascara smudged, eyes hollow. The doors opened and I stepped in, my heartbeat echoing in the small space. When they closed, I let out a single, shaky breath. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was grief. Grief for every late night, every missed holiday, every moment I'd given to this company, to him, believing that hard work would earn respect. But I finally understood. In his eyes, I'd never be the daughter worth defending. The doors opened on the ground floor, and I walked out into the cold evening air, tears stinging but silent. The wind carried the scent of sugar and raspberries from the production floor vents, the same smell that used to mean pride. Now, it only tasted like loss. The wine glass sat untouched on my coffee table, catching the glow of the street lamp outside. I hadn't even bothered turning on the lights. Just the dull flicker of the TV casting shadows on the walls. Some old sitcom rerun laughing in the background. Too bright, too cheerful for the way my chest felt caved in. I lay curled on the couch in the same clothes I'd worn to work, shoes still on, arms wrapped around a throw pillow like it could hold me together. But nothing could. All those years, all those weekends I skipped vacations to make deadlines. The birthday dinners I left early. The flu I worked through to finalize that Whole Foods pitch. Every sacrifice, every compromise. And for what? So my father could sit across from me in that conference room and act like I was the problem. I reached for my phone out of habit, then hesitated. Who would I even call? My contact list blurred behind a veil of tears. I scrolled anyway, as if some miracle name would appear that hadn't let me down. Vanessa used to be in my favorites. I deleted her from that list months ago. But somehow, her name still felt branded in my brain, tied to every wound I couldn't stop picking at. I opened my photo gallery instead. Swiped. Photo after photo, jam jars lined up on a farmer's market table. Me holding our first branded label. Dad standing next to me at the Asheville Local Business Awards, his arm proudly around my shoulder. He used to say I was born to build. I guess he just didn't mean his legacy. I stopped at a picture of me, younger, standing beside a table of product prototypes. I'd set up that booth in the high school gym during an entrepreneurship fair. 17 years old, nervous as hell, but proud. God, I was so proud. And he was too, until now. A sob caught in my throat before I could stop it, raw and quiet and humiliating in its intensity. I curled tighter into the couch, one arm over my face like I could block the memories from crawling in. "This is what I get," I whispered to the silence. "All those years, and this is what I get." The apartment felt smaller than usual, like the air had thickened. Even the ticking of the kitchen clock sounded accusatory. I didn't know how long I lay there, the shadows moving slowly across the walls until the street lamp buzzed once and blinked out. Darkness. It was worse, somehow, than the shouting had been. At least when they underestimated me in public, I could fight. But this was quiet erasure. They hadn't just rejected my ideas, they'd rejected me, and I didn't know how to claw my way back from that. My eyes landed on the whiteboard near the window, once filled with projections and campaign notes. I used to wake up early, coffee in hand, excited to update it. Now it was blank, just a ghost of ink smudges. I sat up, wiped my face, and looked around my apartment, the place I barely spent time in because the office had always felt like home. Now I didn't know where home was. And I didn't know who I was without that conference badge, that title, that corner desk with the view of the apple trees. I stared down at my hands. The same hands that had cooked down test batches at 2 a.m., that had packaged the first 500 jars of blueberry basil for the Asheville market on a shoestring budget. They built everything. And still, they were shaking now. I wanted to believe I was strong enough to move on, to be better than this, to rise above it all. But that night, I wasn't strong, I was shattered. And the worst part, no one even knew because they hadn't fired me. They had just made me irrelevant. I didn't hear the knock at first. It was faint, almost polite. Not the kind of pounding that demands attention, but the kind that gently asks, "Can I come in before you disappear completely?" I forced myself off the couch, wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater, and opened the door. There she was, Ava, my cousin. 3 years younger, smart-mouthed, sharp-eyed. We hadn't talked much lately, not since she moved to Raleigh to start her own marketing firm. But now she stood on my doorstep in leggings and an oversized hoodie, holding a cardboard drink tray in one hand and a worn manila folder in the other. "I brought caffeine," she said, "and fire." I blinked at her, stunned. "What are you? How did you even know?" "News travels fast when Lancaster Jam starts leaking employees in the group chat," she said, brushing past me like she owned the place. "You didn't think Clara wouldn't text me after the boardroom meltdown, did you?" She set the drinks on my kitchen counter, then held up the folder with a grin that was too fierce to be casual. "Also, I found something big." I followed her numbly as she sat cross-legged on the floor in front of my coffee table, flipping open the folder like she was unveiling a secret map. "These are your original contracts from when you formally took over product development," she said, tapping the first page. "Back when the company restructured and Harold, your loving father, made you sign all that paperwork so you could pitch to investors without liability drama." I stared at the documents. I remembered the day clearly. Dad had shoved a stack of papers across the table, muttering something about formality for the lawyers. "I skimmed them," I admitted. "I was in the middle of launching the summer line." "Well, I read them," Ava said, pulling out a highlighter. "And guess what? There's a clause right here, Section 5.2. You retain ownership of all intellectual property developed under your lead unless formally transferred in writing." I froze. "That includes recipes, formulas, product names, even the automation system you designed for the fruit sorting line." I reached for the paper, reading the paragraph again and again, the words blurring with adrenaline. "You're telling me?" "I'm telling you," Ava said, eyes gleaming. "They don't own your work, you do. And if they try to keep using it without your permission, especially after pushing you out, you've got a legal grenade in your hands." I sat back against the couch, mind reeling. For the first time in days, my breath came a little easier. Not relief exactly, but clarity. Purpose. Like someone had kicked open a window in a smoke-filled room. Ava leaned forward, her tones softening. "I know you're hurting, but don't let them bury you in it. You made that company what it is." I swallowed hard. "Dad won't care about clauses. He'll just say it was all part of the family." "Then stop playing by family rules," she said. "This isn't Sunday dinner, this is war." I stared at the folder in my lap, and slowly a different voice started to echo in my head, one I hadn't heard in a while. The voice that used to whisper, "You built this, you belong here, you're not done." I looked up at Ava, eyes stinging, but my spine straightened. "Then I'm taking back what's mine." She smiled, handed me my coffee. "I thought you might say that." It started with a phone call. I was halfway through my second coffee the following Monday when my phone buzzed. Dad, the screen read. I stared at it a long moment before answering. His voice was calm, measured. "Emily, can you come in today? I think we need to talk." I didn't reply right away. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part, some foolish, stubborn piece of my heart, wanted to believe this was it, that he'd finally seen the truth, that he wanted to make things right. So I said, "I'll be there in an hour." I dressed with deliberate care. Nothing dramatic, just a sharp blazer over a blouse I'd almost tossed out last week when I was sure I was finished. I pulled my hair back, put on lipstick, and looked myself in the mirror. You know who you are. Let them try to pretend otherwise. The parking lot looked the same, the building too, but something felt different. I stepped through the glass doors and immediately noticed the quiet. Too quiet. The production line wasn't humming. The scent of cooking fruit was absent. Even the usual shuffle of boxes and voices behind the glass office partition was missing. My stomach turned. Marcus wasn't at the front desk. Clara wasn't at her computer. The break room light was off. And in the main office, Vanessa. In my chair, feet kicked up on the desk, tapping at her phone like she was answering messages from the Queen. She looked up and smiled, sweet and syrupy. The kind of smile people wear at funerals when they want to look innocent. "Emily," she said brightly. "Glad you came." I glanced around. The place looked abandoned. "Where is everyone?" "Sent home," she said. "Temporary pause in production. Dad thought it was time for a little reset." A chill crept down my spine. Just then, Harold walked in from the hallway. He didn't even flinch at the sight of me. "Emily," he said with a tight nod. "Glad you made it." Want to tell me what's going on? I asked. He walked around to the other side of the room and motioned toward the whiteboard where someone had scribbled a new title. Restructuring Plan Q4, we've reorganized, he said simply. Vanessa will be taking over operations as well. We're pivoting toward a more modern workflow. My hands curled into fists. You halted production. We have open orders. Those can wait. Right now we're cleaning house. Vanessa has new ideas about brand identity and she'll be leading the transition. I looked at him, really looked. There wasn't a trace of hesitation in his face. He meant it. He had not called me here to fix things. He'd called me here to watch it burn. So what? I said slowly. Was this meeting about? His voice was almost bored. I thought maybe, if you were ready to apologize, we could find you a new place here. A desk. Somewhere you could still contribute, even if not in a leadership role. My ears rang. A desk, not a title, not a role, a desk. Vanessa smirked and said quietly, we'll even give you a nice window. And there it was. They didn't want peace. They wanted submission. My father didn't want his daughter back. He wanted her beneath him again. Something sharp and ancient broke in my chest. Not rage, clarity. I see, I said. He raised a brow. You'll consider the offer. No, I said simply, turning toward the door. I already gave my answer. And then I walked out, my heels echoing through the silent, hollowed-out halls of the company I built. But I didn't look back, because this time, I wasn't hoping for him to call me back. I was already planning what came next. The sky over Asheville was heavy with low clouds the next morning, the kind that made everything look colorless and waiting. I parked in my usual spot in front of the factory, though I knew it would be the last time. There were no announcements, no grand exits, no crowd of whispering employees this time. Just the soft hum of the vending machine in the lobby and the smell of old coffee drifting from the break room. I walked through the halls with a single cardboard box in my arms. Inside were the pieces of 10 years of my life, my ceramic mug, a few product mock-ups, a framed photo from the first trade show I'd ever won. The walls that had once echoed with my footsteps now felt hollow, stripped of warmth. Marcus met me halfway down the hall. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at the box in my hands and sighed. So this is really it? He asked. Yeah, I said quietly. It's time. He shifted awkwardly. I just want you to know none of us agreed with what happened. Everyone saw what you did for this place. I know, I said, forcing a small smile. Take care of them, Marcus. I'll try, he said. But it won't be the same. He turned to go, then stopped. Are you? I'll be fine, I said before he could finish. Better than fine. I kept walking until I reached my father's office. The door was half open, the faint murmur of his voice on a conference call seeping through. I waited in the doorway until he looked up. He ended the call abruptly, eyes narrowing. Emily, what are you doing here? I placed the box gently on a chair. Finishing what you started. He frowned but didn't interrupt as I set a plain white envelope on his desk. On the front, in careful handwriting, were 2 words, resignation letter. Inside, though, was more than that. He reached for it, suspicion already creeping into his expression. I included all the paperwork, I said evenly. It should make the next few weeks easier for you. Before he could open it, the door behind me creaked, and in walked Butko, our company's longtime attorney. His timing, as always, was impeccable. Morning, he said, nodding at both of us. Harold, you wanted me to go over the O. His eyes fell on the envelope. What's that? Apparently, my father said tightly, my daughter's farewell. Butko took the envelope from his hands, scanning the top page. His brows shot up almost instantly. Is this real? I nodded. All of it. What is it? Harold demanded. Butko hesitated, then looked at him like someone about to deliver bad news to a king. These are legal transfer records. Emily holds the intellectual property rights to the automation patents and several of the product lines. He flipped through the documents again. She owns the production system, the recipe formulations, and the software tied to the labeling algorithm. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint buzz of the overhead light. My father blinked once. That can't be right. It's signed and dated, Harold, Butko said quietly. It's airtight. I stood straighter, meeting his eyes. You wanted to treat me like I was replaceable, but the company runs on my work and I never signed it away. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off gently. I'm not staying. I just wanted you to know that from this moment on, you're operating without my permission." Then I turned to leave, pausing only long enough to add, "And for what it's worth, you could have had me as your partner, not your enemy." I walked out before he could answer, my heels clicking against the tile like punctuation marks to a chapter finally closed. Outside, the air was cold and damp. I lifted my face to the wind and let it sting. It felt clean, almost holy. Behind me, through the glass walls, I saw Butko showing my father the fine print, his expression shifting from confusion to fury to something I couldn't quite name, fear. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because this wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was balance. I hadn't even made it to my car when I heard the office door slam open behind me. "Emily!" I didn't stop walking. "Emily!" His voice wasn't calm anymore. It cracked like a whip through the parking lot. I turned slowly, watching my father storm toward me, cheeks flushed, papers still clutched in his hand like a weapon. "What is this?" he barked, waving the folder I'd left on his desk. "Some kind of stunt." I said nothing, let him rant. "You can't do this," he snapped. "You think this company will survive with you walking out and holding the entire production process hostage?" I tilted my head. "You mean the production system I designed, implemented, and legally own?" His jaw clenched. "You were part of this family business. That meant something." "It did," I said softly, "until you made it clear I didn't." He paced like a cornered animal. "You're going to ruin us over pride, over a few patents." I took a slow step toward him. "No. I'm protecting what I built, from people who would rather see it fail than admit I was the one holding it together." His eyes flared. "Have you learned your lesson yet?" That question hung there, thick and ugly. The same line he used when I was 10 and challenged his decision in a family meeting. When I was 21 and dared to disagree about vendor contracts. When I was 34 and told him Vanessa wasn't ready. Every time I stood up, that was his warning shot. Learn your lesson. Meaning, fall in line, but not this time. I took a breath, looked him straight in the eyes, and said, "Yes, I've learned I should never let you treat me like I'm disposable." His face froze. And in that stillness, I saw it not anger, not even disappointment, just disbelief. Because deep down, he never thought I'd walk away, never believed I'd stop chasing his approval. Behind us, the factory stood silent. No humming machinery. No team scrambling to fix someone else's mistake. Just stillness. Because I had taken the heart of it with me, and he knew it. "You're making a mistake," he said, but his voice didn't have the fire anymore. It sounded old, defeated. "No," I replied. "You did when you chose loyalty to chaos over competence, when you made me feel like a stranger in the house I helped build." He opened his mouth to speak, but I turned first. "I hope Vanessa learns," I added, not unkindly. "I really do, but I won't be here to clean up after her." And with that, I walked away. This time for good, not out of spite, not even out of grief, but because I was finally done trying to earn space in a room I'd designed from the ground up. I was done shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. And I had work to do. Real work. It didn't take long for the unraveling to begin. By the second week of my absence, production delays were a daily occurrence. Clients started calling Clara directly, asking why shipments were late, why their orders were incorrect, why no one was returning emails. I didn't have to guess what was happening. I knew exactly how much the systems depended on the tools I'd created. The jam formulation process alone was controlled by a software script I'd custom built, one Vanessa had never bothered to learn. The fruit sorting calibration, the batching formula tracker, the auto-generated allergen logs, all mine, and all gone. What surprised me was how fast the employees started leaving. Marcus gave notice first, quietly, respectfully. Then came 2 of the seasonal hires from packaging, then Clara. Every day I heard from someone new, a whisper, a text. "Are you hiring? Just wanted to say I miss working with you." Even the distribution manager, a guy who once told me he'd retire before changing companies, sent me a resume. Word was out. Lancaster Jam wasn't running anymore. It was hemorrhaging. And then one afternoon I got the call. I saw the name on the screen and didn't even flinch. Harold Lancaster. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Emily." That voice again measured, too even. I recognized the tone. He was trying to stay composed. That meant he was desperate. "I'd like to talk," he said. "You're talking." "Not like this, in person. I have an offer." I said nothing. It's fair, he added. Generous. I could picture him pacing his office, that same conference table now gathering dust, his pride wrapped in a manila envelope like a peace treaty that came a year too late. I'll send it over, he said. That evening it arrived by courier. A thick envelope, cream-colored, handwritten in black ink, Emily from Dad Not Harold, not Lancaster, just Dad. I held it for a moment, fingertips brushing the flap. Then I slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, unopened. Because there are some apologies that don't belong in numbers. And I didn't need his validation anymore. Across from me, Ava was hunched over a laptop, reviewing a supplier proposal. We'd been working 16-hour days lately, building our own brand from the ground up. The kind of dream we used to whisper about when we were teenagers, back when success felt like something we had to ask permission for. Not anymore. I looked around the room, our rented space above an old bakery, still half filled with sample jars and mood boards. It didn't look like much yet, but it was ours. No inheritance, no family name, just grit. Ava glanced up, reading my face. Was that the offer? Yeah, you open it. Nope, she grinned. Didn't think so. We clinked glasses, sparkling water with lime, our new after-hours ritual, and I couldn't help smiling. It didn't matter what the number was. He could have offered me a blank check, but I was never going back. Not to the man who underestimated me, and not to the company that only realized my value when it was too late. Some lessons come with a dollar sign. Mine came with freedom. The factory ribbon fluttered in the breeze, red satin, stretched between two silver posts like a finish line. And in a way it was, but not the end of a race. The beginning of something entirely ours. Ava stood beside me on the makeshift stage, her smile practically glowing. She held the oversized scissors while I steadied the ribbon, our hands almost shaking with excitement. Are you ready? She whispered. I nodded, heart pounding. Let's cut it. And with one satisfying snip, the crowd burst into applause. It wasn't huge, maybe 60 people. Local investors, food bloggers, loyal supporters who'd followed our launch online. But each face in that crowd had chosen us. Not a legacy brand. Not a family name. Us. Welcome to Wisteria Jam Co., I said into the mic, voice catching just slightly. Built by women, built by hand, built by heart. The tasting room behind us was lined with long wooden tables, each one crowned with open jars of our launch flavors, blackberry lemon zest, spiced plum rose, and my personal favorite, peach bourbon vanilla. People dipped crackers, swirled spoons, closed their eyes, and smiled. Because we hadn't just launched a product, we'd launched joy. 2 weeks earlier, we'd signed a contract with a boutique grocery chain with 23 locations across the Carolinas. And just last night, an email had come through from a Whole Foods regional buyer asking for samples. Everything we'd built was catching wind and taking flight. I walked through the factory's main floor, marveling at how different it felt from Lancaster's old space. Open windows, fresh paint, bright LED lights and labeled zones, each machine optimized with the software I'd rebuilt from the ground up. But what really set it apart? The people. We hired folks who'd been laid off during the Lancaster restructure. Talented, kind-hearted workers who knew how to make things well. I paid them fairly. I asked for their input, and I listened. There were no power games here, no politics, just progress. Ava appeared beside me with 2 sparkling lemonades, bumping my shoulder as she handed one over. You do realize you're going to be famous now, right? I laughed. Infamous, maybe. We already got a DM from a Charlotte food blogger with 80,000 followers. She wants to come shoot a reel. I smiled, sipping the cold citrus. Let her. Let them all. We clinked our glasses again, this time in celebration. This time without bitterness clinging to the bottom. Later, I was interviewed by a local news channel that had caught wind of the story. The reporter, a young woman with bright eyes and a quick wit, asked me, "What made you decide to leave your previous company and start from scratch?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "There's something powerful about building something that no one can take from you," I said. "I spent years making someone else's dream profitable. This time, it's my dream, and no one gets to rewrite that." She smiled. "Any advice for young entrepreneurs?" I glanced at Ava, who nodded like she already knew what I was about to say. "Back up your data," I said with a wink. The crowd laughed. But more than that, back up yourself. Believe in your work enough to protect it, because no one will fight for your worth harder than you. When the interview ended, I stepped outside for a moment, the evening sun painting the sky in soft golds and purples. I looked out over the parking lot, where the lights of the city blinked on like quiet encouragement. It was surreal standing here, knowing that I hadn't just survived, I'd evolved. It was exactly 1 year to the day. I was standing in the tasting room of our flagship Wisteria store, clipboard in hand, as a group of fresh-faced interns scribbled notes and nibbled toast loaded with jam. "Rule number 1, I said, pointing to the wall where our slogan was stenciled in soft lavender. No shortcuts, no silence. We do things right, and we speak up when something's wrong." A few of them nodded, eyes wide. One girl raised her hand. "Is it true you built the whole production system yourself?" I smiled. "Yes. After someone told me it wasn't my place to lead, I decided to make my own place." Laughter, light and genuine. The energy here was nothing like the hushed tension of Lancaster's old walls. People breathed in this space. They collaborated, celebrated, created. Behind me, the new magazine cover was framed on the wall. The Jam Queen of Appalachia, Business Monthly. I still laughed when I saw it. Not because it wasn't earned, but because I remembered the girl who once cried into a couch cushion, thinking she'd lost everything, only to realize that what she lost had never truly belonged to her anyway. Now, everything did. Our jars were on Whole Foods shelves in 5 states. A local distillery was pitching a cocktail collaboration. And last week, we signed a partnership with a women-led nonprofit in Tennessee, hiring single mothers to manage our seasonal kitchen. The work wasn't just profitable, it was purposeful. And for the first time in my life, I was proud without permission. Back in my office, I sat down to review quarterly numbers when I noticed it, an email notification. From Harold Lancaster, subject, proud. That was all. No body text. No salutation. Just the one word he couldn't bring himself to say in person. I stared at it for a while. Let the weight of it settle. Once I might have cried. Once I might have replied with something gracious, something hopeful, but not now. Now I saw it for what it was, too little, too late, and that was okay. Because some things deserve closure, and some things deserve silence. I moved my mouse over the message. Click, delete, no ceremony, no regret, just space cleared for something better. Outside my office window, Ava was laughing with a customer in the front lobby. The scent of warm peach and ginger filled the air. Somewhere, a jar popped as it sealed. I leaned back, eyes closing just for a second. It was quiet, but not the kind that hurts. The kind that heals. If this story moved you, tell me, where are you watching from? Have you ever had to walk away from something broken to build something better? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you'll ever do. And other times, it's just the beginning.